Hello and welcome to Headspring's Insight video on COP26 and sustainability. In the wake of the COP26 conference held in Glasgow last November, companies are digesting what it means for them. To talk about where the corporate world stands today and the future actions around climate change, I'm joined here by Silvia Pavoni, who is currently the editor of Sustainable Views, which is an FT platform on sustainable finance and ESG policy. So Silvia, welcome. Let's get straight to the issue here. What can professional services firms actually do, and what are they doing to reduce their carbon footprint?
So there are many things that they can do, starting from looking inwards. So you can start measuring, of course, your carbon footprint and start looking at your real estate, the way that you move around. You get your staff to move around the world. So there are all these very obvious things that of course, financial services companies can do. But because what they produce is actually a service, arguably, the biggest impact for those kind of companies would be to channel those services, in the case, for example, of a bank or an asset manager, channel capital towards activities that ultimately will have a positive environmental and social impact.
Okay. And what are the kind of sectors where that focus can have the maximum impact?
Oh, that's a really big question. There's so many sectors, and so you need to look at obviously energy. So that's the more obvious one. But because there is such a big need for renewable technology, also to get to the stage where we need it to be to replace efficiently fossil fuels, then interestingly would be good to push capital towards those kind of new companies coming up with green technology. So that's an interesting area. But really, when you're thinking about transition and transitioning towards a greener economy, the incremental changes can happen across all sectors. And so it's something that's it's important to include, essentially I'm saying it's important to include all sectors in these kind of efforts.
So it's not a matter of now shifting sectors, it's just looking at the particular issues of the sectors where you're lending and where you're doing transactions and actually see what you can do in those particular sectors.
That's definitely valid. Of course, then there are extreme sectors where you probably do not want to really put your money. So tar sands. So, fossil fuels that are taken out of the ground through highly polluting techniques. And then, so there are those sectors that banks are saying they do not want to touch. Although, of course, we've also seen scandals, and many of those names have been actually, thrown into the spotlight because although they were saying one thing in their policy, then in reality they were still continuing to finance, for example, Amazon oil, which has been the cause of devastating pollution and terrible consequences for indigenous peoples in Ecuador, in the Ecuadorian side of the Amazon forest, just to name one example.
I mean, you say that the nature of the business of financial services firms means that they're looking outwards to have an impact. But is there something within financial companies and professional services companies where, for example, employees, not necessarily the board level decision makers, actually could have an impact within their companies, or is it just very, very marginal?
Sure, everyone can, well, in the grand scheme of things, perhaps it's marginal, but I think everyone probably is feeling like the two of us, being here at the FT, we all kind of think about when I go and get my coffee, I'm not going to ask for the plastic cup, I'm going to ask for in my case, the little ceramic espresso cup, and then I give back. So all of us and each of us can make a contribution at work, but also in our personal lives. So that's absolutely valid.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking one hears about sort of Bitcoin mining and the incredible use of sort of energy. It's not exactly what most financial services companies are doing. But I mean, things like foreign travel and things like that. I mean, obviously post-COVID that's reduced, but it's quite a big factor, I would have thought.
That's definitely a big factor. And, you know, the pandemic has really made us all realize that a lot of things can be done remotely. And so, you know, just talking to a few of my contacts, and I'm sure you're probably experiencing the same, maybe you don't need to travel, you know, across the world for that initial introduction, or maybe your M&A pitch, perhaps the initial chat could be done via Zoom. So a lot of people are realizing that not only it is beneficial for the environment, it is also good for your personal life. You don't need to be in a plane all the time, and you can actually enjoy, you know, your life
All right.
at your main location.
Yeah. And can you just give us a sense of the time frames where companies are able to sort of reduce their carbon footprint?
So
what are we looking at?
There is great pressure to bring those initial 2050 net zero targets that we had some time ago forward. And so then you start hearing about 2040 targets, 2030 targets. Now, for some, it is still good that you come up with a target, because that kind of tends to focus minds. When then you speak to the environmentalist groups, a lot of them are saying it's ridiculous, 2050. I mean, we're going to be way too old to even care what happens in 2050. So it's very easy for a corporate CEO to just commit to that target, or even for a politician. And so I think that's greater pressure, greater public pressure, greater pressure from asset owners or from pension funds is also helping perhaps to sort of tighten the knots on those commitments, on those corporate commitments.
Okay, so realistically, in your view, if it's not 2050, what do you think it could be?
Oh, it depends on. I mean, to be honest, you know, I was about to say it depends on the company. Potentially anything is feasible. Mm-hmm. It depends on the level of commitment and investment that you want to put towards reaching those goals, and whether that also reaching those goals come with a trade-off in terms of financial returns in the short term, because that is also very important, right? So we're talking about positive investor pressure, but you also need to consider the fact that we investors tend to look at returns in a very short-term way, unless you are, again, an asset owner like a pension fund who enjoys a much longer time horizon. So that's a really important actually point, and something that can really help to turn things around, whether you have patient capital being able to potentially take a little bit of a short-term hit, versus the ones who actually need to meet those financial returns every quarter.
And finally, are there any other regulations coming down the line?
Oh, so much.
That I mean, what are the main ones that one should be aware of?
We could stay here and talk for another hour, just start listing all the regulations. But Europe is being really prolific. So you have the taxonomy, the green taxonomy, which now will also look at social aspects. So that's a big project. That taxonomy also comes with a disclosure element. So not only does it define what is green, but also tells you how to disclose it. Equally, because of course we're talking about Europe, but it's important to look also at other jurisdictions that are starting to catch up. You also have work happening in China around the green taxonomy. There, clearly China, the biggest polluter in the world, at the same time, equally because of its size, potentially being able to kind of tilt things. In Europe, again, we have, I mentioned the Sustainable Finance Directive, the SFDR, which is the one that looks at the way that asset managers label funds. Something super important is happening in the accounting world. And so IFRS, which is the accounting standard set, has also set up a board, International Sustainability Standards Board, that will look at these elements and will look at how to incorporate ESG factors, sustainability factors into reporting and accounting.
So just a few of a whole plethora of regulations
yes.
that people really need to be aware of. Silvia, thank you very much, and thank you for watching this video.
My pleasure.